Okay, welcome to our January CalSPRA conference callback. Each year, we take our highest rated sessions from our annual conference and ask them to present again to dive deeper into this topic, allow more people to join, and here we go, allowing recording and have a further conversation. So my name is Jessica Hull. I am proud to be your CalSPRA president. I also serve as the executive director of communication and community engagement for the Roseville City School District here in Roseville, just outside of Sacramento. Today we have with us Nikki Henry, who is the Chief Communications Officer from Fresno Unified. And Fresno Unified serves over 70,000 students and over 10,000 employees. So in an organization, especially of that size, you can have a situation where you are the district and your board and leadership team are telling you to engage personally with members of the public, and yet you are a nameless, faceless entity. So Nikki's going to go through about how to humanize your district. So Nikki, thank you so much for your time and expertise, and take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jessica. I appreciate it. And welcome. Thank you all for joining. I am honored to kind of be able to share this presentation again. I was able to share this at CalSPRA last year, and we had such a great group and great feedback. So I'll take us through this. Obviously, things are always a little bit different when you're in a virtual training versus in person. So feel free to jump in and ask questions in the chat. I'm happy to make this as much of a conversation as you guys would like it to be. To kind of start off, so you see on the first slide and kind of my name here of the session is humanize your district. Kind of a word I came up with, a kind of a made up word, right? But I really felt that when I came into the district, I did not have a background in public education. I was working as a nonprofit. I was around education, but I wasn't the district, right? And so coming into the district, I realized that what my board and my superintendent were asking of me was to really change the narrative, historically negative narrative of the district, so that people would become ambassadors and champions and proud of the Fresno Unified district and brand, really, right? But you can't do that by acting like a faceless, nameless bureaucracy. People do not connect with large systems, right? Very easy to attack a nameless, faceless organization, right? So we had to bring that human element if I was going to reach any of the goals that they had for myself and my team. So that's what we're jumping into today. A couple of things that you can expect if you stay in this session or you watch the recording. You'll learn why it's so important to put faces and names to every one of your communications, how you do that. We're going to talk about strategies and ideas that you can put into action immediately. Also, how you can improve some of your consistency without it being so time consuming that you really just kind of get off of your habits. We'll talk about some media relationships, and then we'll also talk about advisory committees. The picture on this slide that you see is our superintendent on the left, Bob Nelson, along with 4 other superintendents from our surroundings last year. We have some new superintendents in 2 of those districts, but what you see here is a collaboration between our surrounding school districts, and we also had our city's mayor as well as our city's police chief who came together because we found last year, and sadly again this year, that we're having such an uptick of accidents, car accidents with our students as they're coming to and from school. And we all know what a huge issue that is and why we need to keep our kids safe. So we brought everyone together in a PSA series, and everyone got to tell their personal story, right? But you got to see that collaboration, that human element. On the far right, you see Superintendent Emer O'Farrell. She was the superintendent of Clovis Unified. She retired last year. She told a story in her 30-second PSA of when her daughter was a teenager and she got that call of your child's been in an accident, right? So she brought that human element. It wasn't just, hey, stay safe, slow down in school zones, be careful for our kids, put your phone down. It was personal, it was human, it's something that as a mother, you immediately relate to, right? So it was a good example of collaboration, but also bringing that human element to such an important issue that we were all working on together. So want to give you a little idea of the current reality and results that we have within Fresno Unified. We are an incredibly high need district. We have just 1 in 3 of our students meeting or exceeding state standards in English language arts and only 1 in 5 for math. Very high needs. We have about 90% unduplicated, our UPP. So most of our students are socioeconomically disadvantaged. We have a high population of English language learners, foster homeless youth, all of that, right? Nobody wants to talk about their deficits, but that's the reality of where we're at. And with that, we have a historically negative narrative as an underperforming district, which when you see those numbers, that's not wrong, right? But it also digs a little bit deeper than that. I'm not sure how things are in your community, but Fresno has a very long history of kind of a self-loathing self-image. So, we're not the Bay Area, we're not LA, we're not San Diego. Some people so kindly refer to us as the armpit of California. So we kind of have that feeling, when you're out of state, you say, oh, I'm from California. And they're like, where? You say Fresno and they're like, oh, okay. That's not what people think of with California. And I've realized that it's gone so deep that it's become a part of our students' sense of self, that coming from Fresno means you're not successful, that being in Fresno means you won't be successful, that you have to leave Fresno to become successful, right? And so a lot of people who think this is self-deprecating and is harmless, kind of, self-deprecating humor, don't realize that it's really embedded itself into the psyche of our system and the psyches of our children, and that is incredibly harmful. So that's really where I see my biggest job, is how we can chip away at that and show the human element, show the human potential, so that we really change that perspective and we have confidence that's instilled in our kids instead of self-deprecation or self-loathing. So we have kind of those negative pieces to start, and yet we in 2022 we started working with a research partner called FM3. They do a lot of polling for bond measures, and so they also were able to do some polling for our communications effectiveness, because as you know, it's really hard to put measures to your communications. And one of the things that we found as we went through these surveys, one year we did for families a representative sample, the next year we did for staff, and this year we'll be going back to families. So every other year we'll come back to those baselines and check where we're at. But what we found was more than 8 in 10 parents and 3 in 4 staff members were satisfied with our communication from Fresno Unified as a district. We were very clear, not your school, not your PTA, not the social media account at Fresno High School. It was from Fresno Unified School District. And then we found that more than 1 in 3 and 2 in 5 staff members were very satisfied with that communication. So pleasantly surprised of where we were, and realized that some of the tactics that we had been using for the 3 years previous, in the midst of the pandemic, right? 2022, we were just coming off of mask mandates, really, that we had some good foundation. And then we found that about 3 out of 4 parents and staff viewed our communications from the district as trustworthy, understandable, accurate, and timely, which obviously is important to all of us, right? So what this showed me was that the things that we were trying, the things we were doing differently over those 3 years previous to this were working. And a lot of that is about humanizing the district. So that's what I'm going to share with you all today. So why should you humanize? One, you saw some of our results, right? That's obviously important. But also I think it's just a general understanding that engagement, which is what we want engagement. We don't just want participation. We don't just want you on the sideline. We want you to be a part of the Fresno Unified family. We want you to be engaged. We want you to have ownership. And engagement thrives on human relationships. Relationships build that knowledge, familiarity, that trust. We know that employee engagement, student engagement, family engagement, all of those things contribute to improved student outcomes, right? So I really see that as our charge in communications is how are we taking our area and creating these opportunities to build engagement and further engagement, knowing that that's our indirect impact to the classroom. Um, Also having that familiarity, having faces instead of just having all of your messages come from Fresno Unified Communications Office. It means that when there is a crisis, which we all know is going to happen and happen again and happen again, you have some familiarity, you have some credibility. And so when they then hear you in a crisis, they see your face, they feel familiar, there's a little bit of calm in that storm, right? We also know without your voice, negativity will fill the void. So there have definitely been times, I'm sure we've all done this, when crises are going on or some negative story is out in the media and you think, you know what, we're just gonna say nothing because anything we say is gonna make this worse, right? And you know what, I don't knock that. I think that, you know, less is more in some of these situations. But if you have no voice, then you only have the voice of the negative. So you have to be willing to engage in a human way when things are tough as well. And you will get some respect. You'll also get some, you know, some hate. You'll also get a little beat up. But I think that the reward is bigger than the risks that you have there. I'll talk about this a little bit as we go on, but some of you might know we just went through quite a contentious negotiations process with our teachers. We averted a strike one day before it was, you know, scheduled to happen. We had national level news on this, and it was our teachers association scheduled their strike for the same day that Portland started their strike, and then we see how that worked out, right? And it was, I will tell you, I have some PTSD, but my face was out there, my name was out there, and there were some ugly things that came because of that, that people could personally attack me. But also what I found during that time is I did a sentiment analysis of all of the news coverage that we had was our negative percentage of stories stayed at 14% from the quarter before we started talking about the strike to the quarter that was full of strike stories. What we found was that our area of neutral and mixed stories grew to about a third of the stories, right? Because in all of those stories, you had our voice, you had our face, you had our side. We weren't silent, we weren't nasty either, like, you know, our labor unions get to be, but they were balanced stories because you always had our narrative, our face, our district in those stories, right? So to be able to avoid going completely negative during that time is something that I'm super proud of. Even though, you know, it ended up with a picture of me on the unofficial Fresno Unified Facebook page saying I was the scariest Halloween costume of the year. So there is ugliness that comes with it. I'm not acting like this is easy. It's not. It's not. But it's worth it, right? We averted the strike. We stayed in the crisis. We didn't pull out of it. We didn't get silent. And when I look, no judgment, I don't know the folks in Portland, but when I was looking at Portland's social media at the same time, news coverage, it was crickets. It was crickets, right? So anyways, that's a little bit of a tangent, but I think it's important to have your voice and your face there, even when there's negativity. Media partners are going to be more likely to include your district perspective when you are a human. You build those relationships with them. You all know this, right? When we were, I would say at least 4 to 5 weeks before the scheduled strike was going to happen, I was with our top 3 media partners almost every single day. I gave them an interview. If they wanted it, I was there. Come to my office. We were like best friends, right? But it, again, made sure that stories didn't go out as one-sided, which was important. I think it also, as you bring that human element, it gives your students and your families, your staff, your community, it gives them the opportunity to be ambassadors for your district. If they're just promoting Fresno Unified School District, that's difficult. But when they're promoting and championing Superintendent Bob Nelson, who they've seen play the ukulele and show, his family of 7 children and all of that, it's a lot harder to attack him, and it's a lot more compelling to want to support him, right? Because you're looking at him as a human, not as a system. So we're going to go through 5 top tips that I have for how you can humanize your district that you can put into action relatively easily. Nothing is fully easy, right? But things that you can put out. One thing that we started a few years ago now was daily social media highlights. So we have and then we have about 40 departments. So highlighting every single one of those means that we can only do it once a year on social media at least, right? But we wanted to make it intentional that everyone had their moment. So they get highlighted. What we do is we provide the ask. Hey, we want to highlight you. What do you want to brag on? What's something that people don't know about your department, about your school? Is there someone who's going above and beyond that you want to talk about? And we give them examples of past highlights, right? So they get a little bit of an idea. But we reach out usually to the principal, vice principal, and the office manager, and just say, hey, we want to highlight you on this day. We usually do it at least a month beforehand. And we said, you just give us a contact and, an idea. We'll take it from there. We'll come out, we'll take the pictures if we need to. We'll, make a little video if we need to. We know their plates are overwhelmed. We just need you to give us the idea, give us the content or contact, and we will figure the rest out. Number one, that makes it easy for them. But number two, the last thing you want are your school administrators writing your social media captions. Even though we tell folks that we don't need, we just need the idea, we need the contact. Some of them send us a full social media caption that's like paragraphs long and in edu-speak and all of those things. And we're like, no, sorry, that's not social media speak, right? That's your classroom. That is when you're speaking at a conference. That's not what we need. So you want to kind of try to keep them from doing work that they really don't need to do, but in a kind way, in a way where you're just trying to make their lives easier, right? What we found was a huge jump in engagement in our social media as we started doing these daily highlights, because every single day, number one, you saw something positive, but number two, you saw a school, a person, a program that you personally could connect with, right? So maybe I don't go to Pratt Elementary School, but I know my sister's kids go to Pratt. And you know what? I just saw them in the video. So I'm going to tag my sister. Hey, did you see, Abigail, right? So it's those personal elements. Every single highlight is going to have some personal touch somewhere. It's going to hit a different audience, right? So it really has increased that engagement. The tips and tricks, you guys know this. Keep all your videos less than 60 seconds on social media. The long form just does not work. Not to say that you can't post it. We certainly still post long form, but it doesn't necessarily help our engagement. A lot of the times the long form is more, I'll talk about more like our superintendent messages. And we know that people aren't necessarily watching the whole thing, but there's not really content that you're going to cut out of that weekly message, right? So when you're doing something like this where you want to increase engagement, you need to keep it less than 60 seconds. Give examples to those leaders so that they can give you ideas. You don't want to make it a huge burden on department leaders and site leaders, and write your own captions and try to tie it back to your district's strategic plan or goals. How can you take whatever program or person that they've highlighted and put that back to what people see over and over again on your posters, in your mission, in your district goals, and all of that. So on this page, you see 2 different examples. I will play the video for you. I'm not sure, I didn't test the audio, so we'll try that. This is a video highlight, and down here is an example of just a picture highlight. And I know the writing is very small, but this particular one got a ton of engagement. We had almost 400 likes on Instagram, tons of comments, shares, all of that. And this was about one of our elementary schools who the leadership club came together, and they were doing kind of a slow down around schools campaign themselves, right? Unprompted. They had seen what we had done with the PSA across the district, and said, you know what, we're going to get out in the mornings and we're going to hold our signs to slow down, watch out for our kids, and really make a difference in our community. So it's really super, super cute. And, you know, just an image makes a difference. And then Krat, let me show you this video real quick. Can you guys hear that?
Here at Krat, we're piloting a PE program that is tied to math instruction. We have a fully credentialed PE teacher that gives physical education to our students here, which allows a fully credentialed teacher to push into another classroom so that those students can receive mathematics support.
In Fresno Unified, we currently have elementary teachers who basically teach physical education themselves. We don't have the opportunity to have a credentialed teacher come out and teach those lessons. The hope is that we can see many factors improve. We can see students' physical fitness, their ability to be able to run and just to do things, skip locomotor movements in a much better fashion, and an understanding of that.
Now that they're receiving small group instruction and personalized learning multiple times a week, our hope is to see that the math scores improve.
So just an example of what that school decided that they wanted to highlight. Something innovative they were doing, something to address a need that they saw, a gap that they had. And also there were some great visuals that could go along with that, right? A lot of fun, a lot of smiles, a lot of students, good time that we could have. We are blessed enough to have a media team as part of our communications team. I know that is not the reality at most districts, but just realizing that especially with the capacities of Instagram to create reels now, you can make engaging content like this much easier than you could in the past. You don't need a media team to create a really engaging, fun video at this point. You can do it all from your fingertips on your phone, just taking that time to learn how to make a reel, and you can do that as a one-man shop. So another way that we are working to humanize the district is we do weekly superintendent or deputy superintendent messages. I particularly am intentional about 1 week it's the superintendent, 1 week it's the deputy superintendent, and sometimes during the year we do joint messages as well. But we just brought back the deputy superintendent role about two and a half years ago. And it was important to me knowing that part of the reason we brought that role back was for succession planning, is to make sure that people got very familiar with our deputy superintendent up front, right? And that's now years of time that she's been in front of the camera as well. But it really humanizes those leaders, and you hear directly from their mouths important information, and you get to see their personalities. So I do script these videos, but we've done enough coaching and training on how they can take some liberties, show their personalities. I really try to spend as much time as I can with them so I can learn their language. So when I'm scripting, right, I know what Bob's go-to phrases are of the moment. And I'm telling you, this man changes his phrases and metaphors all the time. So I really have to be on it, right, to really try to write in his voice. But we also talk about how they can take some liberties and really have some authenticity. So they see them on a regular basis. We don't shy away from tough topics either. So we use these highlights or these weekly messages to highlight key things, you know, make celebrations, positive information, but also when it's a rough time, we take the time to talk about that. We don't shy away from it. So in this video, I'm not going to show you the whole thing because it's a long one. But this one was right in the midst, like in the peak of strike talks. We had not gotten a deal yet. Things were getting very ugly on campuses. There was a lot of divisiveness, and our superintendent just had it on his heart to talk about it. So could you add the link here to watch the longer video? Absolutely. It's actually in my slides. These are linked. So when I share the slides, you'll be able to go and watch the full video. But just tips and tricks, important information, especially if it's tough. Do not put out a Friday message or a weekly message and leave out a crisis that was in the media that week, right? That's where you kill trust. That's where you show people that you aren't listening. You're not paying attention. So if you're not willing to talk about the tough crisis that's going on in the moment, you're better to not put out a message at all than to put it out and act like it doesn't exist, right? And then we usually use these opportunities to also point back to other content to, push further engagement. So this video goes out with an email directly from Bob's email to all of our staff first. So I kind of do a short synopsis of the script in the email body, and then you have the link to go over to the video and watch the video. What we found in our research is that most people are reading the email. It's about half who are watching the video, and they watch the video probably like, if there's 4 messages in a month, they're probably watching them like half of the time, right? So the video is great, and you get a decent amount of people who are looking at it and seeing it, but you're getting more people who are reading the email, so that's important that you have that piece as well. We include celebrations, recognitions, all of that. So I'm going to, do we have a specific day and time that we send this out? We send this out on Fridays. When I came to the district, Superintendent Nelson already sent a weekly Friday message email. I came in 6 months before the pandemic, so I had seen that and I'm like, oh, this is great. I love that he does it. He really just kind of spoke from the heart. I wasn't scripting them at the time. And he just spoke on like whatever the issue was that was top of mind for him. And I knew it was great and I needed to know how to leverage it, right? Pandemic hit 6 months later. We knew we had to get video messages out. We ended up kind of co-opting the Friday message as a regular video update. And then we've learned over time since 2020 how we use the video and make sure that we have the written piece, knowing what the research is and how people engage with the content. So it's kind of, had different iterations over the years as we learn and take the feedback. But it's every Friday. Usually it goes to staff in the morning via email. Once it's gone to staff, then it goes out through Parent Square and social media, so that our families and community can see it as well. It's mostly pointed at staff. However, there's a lot of information in there that our families can take advantage of and be aware of as well. And we found specifically in our research that our English learner families, because we also post these with Spanish captions and Hmong captions, our English learner families watch these almost every week. For whatever reason, this really speaks to them. So we've continued it for that reason. And I see another question. How did your superintendent decide on how to talk about the issue? How do you balance site communication versus district level communication about a crisis? Couple things. So from the district level, it depends on the crisis, obviously, but from the district level, we don't want to ignore any crisis that is site-based, right? Because again, you're just showing that you're not paying attention. So we definitely will address it, and we have to be very careful to toe that line of supporting our staff, not throwing anyone under the bus, right? And showing that we're always growing, we're always learning, and if we've made a mistake, that we're learning from our mistake, right? And obviously, you guys know this, we can't talk about personnel issues, we can't do any of that. So we really have to lift the message to something more global than it is that particular crisis. So for instance, when we talk about traffic safety as a district, we aren't talking about one specific instance. We usually bring several instances into it to show like, this is a big issue. This isn't just at this elementary school or this middle school. We talk about the larger issue. So we try to bring it to a little bit more global level. At the school site, we work with our administrators during a crisis to craft messaging that goes directly to their families in the event of a crisis, right? That's much more personal. It comes from the principal or the vice principal, and it's very fact-based. But I've actually learned at CalSPRA before, kind of using the FAPE model. So you're talking about the facts, but you're also kind of putting in there, like, what's the solution? How are we how are we learning from this? How are we putting some emotion into this? How are we being human in in addressing the crisis? But we keep it short and sweet. And that's usually a parent square message, right? That's something that's going directly to that school community. And there's always a way for them to say, if you want to talk more about it, here's who to contact and here's how to contact, right? So I hope that helps a little bit. Superintendent and I decide together on how we talk about different issues. My superintendent is he is very vulnerable and authentic and very love forward, which I think is unique. So I have that in my pocket, which is amazing. And we build off of that. So we have to balance the love with the facts and the love with the professionalism in some people's eyes. And then also all of that with love and empathy with the legalities, right? We had a student who was killed, actually hit by a car crossing the street in front of one of our schools last year or the year before. And it was immediately under criminal investigation. And then there was also immediately litigation from the family against the school district, right? So it really tied our hands on how much we could talk about the situation and the tragedy. So we really had to focus on just the love and care for the family, for the community, the tragedy that came from this, but we could not get into any details or specifics because there was litigation in process saying that, maybe the school had some culpability, right? That's really difficult to do. We had the mother show up to a board meeting more than once, crying to the board. Obviously, she lost her son. I can't even imagine what she was going through. And our board had a very hard time with the legal constraints that were put on them because they feel like they couldn't be empathetic with this mother to the level that they should be, right? So it's tough. It's very, very tough. I'm just going to show a quick minute of this, but again, you'll have the link to watch this further, and you can see all of the weeks that we have on our Vimeo page as well.
Happy Friday, Fresno Unified Family. So I just need to start by acknowledging the very contentious moment that we're in as a district. Right now, teachers, let me say that I see you, and I see you expressing legitimate frustrations of the elements that make your already hard job even harder. Things like class size and just making sure you have adequate support for your students. And actually, I just need to say, I actually respect the fact that you're willing to strike for what you believe to be right. It's important that one stands up for oneself and that we have an opportunity to do that. I will say this, though. I'm trying to figure out what got us to a place where communication broke down to the point where we are. How do we set up our district in such a way that we don't end up here every 3 years? It's a big change from where we were in 2019. If you remember, we actually negotiated a contract ahead of the cycle, and there was no contentiousness and there wasn't any kind of vitriol or grandstanding on either side. So I'm trying to figure out, how do you get back to that? So I want to talk a little bit about one of the pieces of the contract that was in last Friday's proposal that's kind of gone by the wayside because everybody else is talking about things like the bridge to Medicare or class size or the salary article. One of the things that we've proposed is the idea of doing a labor management group, which basically is like a problem-solving team, where 4 members of the association and 4 members of the district will meet.
I'm going to just take that opportunity to pause us anyways. So Bob kind of took this opportunity to show his vulnerability, to acknowledge the contentiousness, and to also highlight something to our staff. At the time, we had provided I think it was like our 2nd or 3rd package proposal. And those package proposals have so much stuff in them, right? And the union's gonna really focus on some things that are important to them. And we need to be able to own the narrative in the areas that we think in that proposal we're speaking to the things our teachers were asking us for, right? So use the opportunity to be human, to put out there what was really keeping him up at night, and then also to explain some of the legalese that was in the proposal for people to understand, what it is that we were going after. So it's a tough time, and he got mixed messaging back from it, right? He got some people that were going to keep sending him the crazy emails, and then he got some people that were telling him, thank you for explaining this to us, we didn't hear this from our union, or whatever it might be, right? So yeah, you'll be able to see lots of other videos. Some are just light and fun and gratitude, some are so another another piece of content that we've put together over been a that we've been doing this is our magazine. So to give context, we had several pieces that we just knew not getting visibility, any of that we started back in our last negotiation cycle in 2019, really storytelling on different staff members, who they are personally, what their connection is, what their motivation is. It's a little bit deeper storytelling. The videos are usually between 2 and 4 minutes. And some people knew about them, but they weren't getting a ton of engagement, at least not the level that we thought they should be, knowing that the stories were so great. Then we also had a district newspaper. So when I got here in 2019, we had a newspaper called Building Futures. And on a monthly basis, 11 months out of the year, 10 or 11 months out of the year, we sent it to every single address in the Fresno Unified School District boundary. It was a large expense. It was a lot of work, and it was very text heavy, like a normal newspaper would be, right? And we found that there just wasn't a lot of engagement. When the pandemic hit in early 2020, I kind of took that opportunity to stop the magazine, at least in the newspaper, at least in paper format, because in the beginning, we didn't even know if we should be passing papers between each other, if that was going to pass COVID, right? So I said, let's take this opportunity, let's halt that. We're going to make it an online newspaper. And we did that for the next couple of years. But we found that the website hits were not very substantial of people going to actually read that newspaper. But the storytelling and the articles that were in it were great stuff, awesome stuff. We also, with that online newspaper and when it was in print, it was a fundraising opportunity. So we got sponsorships, right, out of that. So we started to kind of think about, all right, we have these great pieces of content. They're not getting enough traction. What should we do to streamline and kind of update? And that brought us to the Faces of Fresno Unified magazine, which is a digital magazine online. And we do a fall issue, a spring issue, and a special graduation issue in the summer. And what we're doing is we are doing stories on students. We're doing stories on staff. We're doing stories with alumni spotlights. We are doing Q&As with top leaders in the district. And obviously, we're using amazing visuals. You can see them on the covers right here. But the idea, all of it, is to humanize the district, right? It's a multimedia magazine, meaning that it's online. You see these beautiful pictures. You get to read it in an editorial style, but you also get to click on the links and then watch the videos. So what's awesome about this is that we have a repository of, we'd say, 12 to 20 stories, great stories, that we can repurpose into so much other content throughout the semester. So you put the magazine out there, you do a press release, you do that. Then you can take each article and put those through your social media. You can turn it into a LinkedIn article. You can make it a blog post. You can just post the video on its own, so you're highlighting the story multiple times. And we do see that even by, one time we put the link of Jaslyn's story on social media, and then in a month or two, we put the video of Jaslyn's story. Both of them get great engagement, right? Because you're hitting people in different mediums and they get to engage the way that they want to engage, right? Maybe they want to read, maybe they want to watch, maybe they want to do both. But it's become more manageable by doing it 3 times a year instead of 11 months out of the year. It's made the stories deeper than if it was just the video. It also creates opportunities for media pitches for people who are going above and beyond. And we've had our media partners pick up on several of these stories. One of our seniors that we highlighted, he was in our graduation issue, and we highlighted our scholarship awardees, and then we highlighted, valedictorians and different things. And this particular young man, he was graduating and going on to college. In his freshman year, his father was a street vendor and was brutally murdered while doing his job on the streets of Fresno. It was awful. Everyone remembers the story. And he shared kind of his journey in those last 3 years, since his father passed, and how he's honoring him by continuing his education. That got picked up by media. They were able to dive even deeper into the story. They shared his GoFundMe account. So not only did he get a scholarship from the district, he ended up getting like $10,000 out of this GoFundMe account, right? Again, that's not the purpose, but it's just one of those benefits that comes from having this content that you can repurpose and dive deeper and deeper on. Tips and tricks, we ask staff to nominate other people. So they nominate students, they nominate other staff members. It gets us a lot of story ideas, even if it doesn't end up in the magazine. There are other ways that we can use those highlights. And then we also use our nominees and awardees from our Educator of the Year. We call them Excellence in Education Awards. We use that in our spring edition. We do a real focus on all of our nominees and use that as a storytelling opportunity to go deeper with those nominees and awardees as well. Question, what were your 3 times a year again? So we do a fall issue, a spring issue, and a graduation issue, which comes out in the summer, so that we actually have all the pictures and video of graduation, right? In the fall, I'll say usually we focus on, it's more student heavy, it's more academic heavy. We're usually highlighting some of the main programs going on in the district. So you see this one on the bottom right with all the books. I love this picture. Our photographer dreamt this up and I just love it so much. But that cover was to really focus on a literacy initiative that we had launched this year, right? So we went a little bit deeper into that, contextualizing the story. In the spring, we focus a lot more on our excellence in education storytelling. So it's a little bit more staff heavy. And then obviously graduation is heavy on valedictorians, graduation ceremonies, and scholarship recipients. Consistent media relations. So, I mean, you guys know this. I'm not telling you anything new here, obviously. But that regularity of pitching stories, positive stories, being as accessible as possible to your media partners as often as you can, offering exclusives when you have a tough subject, all of those things I found have greatly improved our media relations and have helped me to keep the positive sentiment analysis higher, much higher than our negative sentiment analysis. In Fresno, we kind of are the news. We're on the news every single night. So you can either, give them positive stories, or they can come up with, some things that might not be as positive. When you serve 70,000 kids and you have over 10,000 employees, this district touches everyone in the community. And our district budget is larger than our city's budget, right? So we know what our position is in the community. And so we really try to own that narrative as much as possible. And that is not how things were done when I came into the district in 2019. We very much kept them at an arm's length. We kept a very, very sterile press releases, very sterile statements. We didn't do a lot of humanizing. So this has been a big shift for us. Tips and tricks that I found, biggest thing for me is providing exclusives. So if we have a positive story that we want to get out, or we have a tough subject that we need to address, we will provide an exclusive with, number one, a station that we trust. And number two, thankfully, these two go together in our community. But number two, the station that our families are watching, reading, listening to the most. So through our polling, we know who those media partners are, right? Like I said, thankfully, the one that's watched the most is also the one we trust the most, and is the most neutral and unbiased. So we reach out to them. One of the examples I gave at CalSPRA was we had our top station cover our superintendent's positive evaluation from the board. That's not that sexy of a story. Nobody really cares about those kinds of things. It's not something they were going to come to us about. We had to pitch it and give them some sort of hook to contextualize the story, but they took it as an exclusive. One, because they knew they were the only ones doing the story, and two, they knew they had kind of that unfettered access to dig a little deeper in the story and have it be a little bit, heavier package. And that was great because normally you don't get coverage on things like that. Also, another tip and trick is reshare these positive stories. We reshare positive stories as much as possible, and we tag those media stations, right? So even if it's a media station I don't love, which is hard for me at times, but if they've put a positive story out, even if 9 out of 10 stories are negative, I will repost that positive one because I think it rewards that media outlet, right? They then get access to our audiences and the credibility that comes along with our district. And so I think it's an incentive to continue building those relationships. And then also there's a benefit to us because when you have reputable stations and newspapers and radio stations who are covering things in your district, it also brings a different level of credibility for people who might not trust you as a system, but trust journalism more than they trust you, right? And it also makes for super easy content. So you see on here, our Roosevelt marching band. So what I did was just take a screen capture of the video story and use that as a picture into the social media post that then links to their story. I tag the station so they get that. And what we found, like with this one, you see it's almost 500 likes, 27 comments, 73 shares, big. And that took me no work. I didn't have to go get that story myself, right? That took me no work except making the social media post. And honestly, it wasn't even timely. This was a story that happened like 2 months before I posted it, but people loved it, right? So it makes your life easier. And, the more that you're out there in the media, we know the better. Who takes the lead on offering exclusives and how do district staff feel about this strategy? It's mixed. But I will say, in our current administration, our board and our superintendent, deputy superintendent are very clear that they see the positives of having our voice in the space. So I have the support that I need. Not every chief feels the same way. And so it can be difficult at times. I take the lead on offering those exclusives as the chief communications officer. And I have those conversations directly with the superintendent and then with our media partners to set that up. I'm always in the room as well, make sure that I'm having a good conversation with the reporter about what it is that we're trying to get after, and also making sure that we hit whatever points that they need. All right. This last one, I won't spend too much time. I found that having audience advisory groups has really helped our team to hone our strategy. So we've developed 3 advisory groups. We have one student advisory group, which is a high school representative from each of our high schools, alternative education and general school, general comprehensive high schools and specialty high schools that we have. So we have one student from each. They come together. It's more of like an internship style where we get a little bit of info and feedback from them on what's most important to students. But most of it is more about them learning. They're interested in media, different things like that. So we provide them a lot of learning as well. But it helps us keep a finger on the pulse of our kids, which often are focused on things very different than our staff and our families. So we do that. They meet monthly. We meet virtually. And then they usually have a capstone project, which I'll show you. One of our past advisory groups did a mental health PSA. And this was kind of in the midst of the pandemic. I want to say it was 2021 that we did this one. So I'll show that to you. But also super important are our parent advisory group and our principals advisory group. So we have a parent university here at Fresno Unified, and we utilize already formed groups that they have. So our PAC, Parent Advisory Committee, that by LCAP we all have to have, but also their different leadership cohorts and other ways that parents engage with them. We use them to kind of message test. We use them to just listen and get feedback. What are the hot topics to them? What do they need more information on? What is keeping them up at night? And then I also have principals. So I have about 12 principals who have volunteered to be on my advisory committee that I meet with on a monthly basis to figure out. And really, I spend the time listening to them. I say, how can I help you take things off your plate so you can focus on the kids? Like, what would help you in the areas of family engagement and communications and things like that? And I get so much feedback that is critical, right? I'm over here solving problems that I think are of top priority, and I talk to my principals and they're like, no, I need XYZ. So it's really, really important. It takes time, but really you want to spend that time just listening. It's just to be with your audiences to know what's top of mind for them. I'll show this really quick. It's just a 30 seconds.
Men don't cry.
It's just a phase. You're just overreacting.
Common phrases we hear can make us feel helpless. Just because you hear this, it doesn't mean you're not valid.
1 in 7 of the youth in the U.S. encounters mental health issues, and half of them are untreated. Acknowledge how you feel. Focus on what you can control, and remember,
You are not alone.
reach out to a trusted adult on campus or visit dpi.fresnounified.org.
We are
All in this together.
So that was from our student advisory
Men
group.
don't cry.
They scripted it. We really were just the scaffolds to make it happen, right? But they said mental health is the #1 thing for students right now. We want to do a PSA. They did their research, all of that, and we just really kind of put our arms around them to make it happen. And we still use this PSA when we don't have something that we need to get in front of the community, like something that's timely. We use this in our TV contracts just to play. It's really evergreen. It's, great stuff.
Men don't cry.
I am going to skip our brainstorming exercise, just end out with things you can start now. So we just have maybe a minute or two for questions, but bring a face and name to every one of your communications. This is something I'm still working on with my team, but we use Parent Square, for example. And when I post, it's from Nikki Henry with my picture. It's not from the communications office. And I ask the same of my staff. Same goes for our social media. When we're out doing stories, yesterday I was showing a kindergarten classroom, but the caption on the story said, "Hi, Nikki here," right? Because I've introduced myself on social media. They know who's out at that school, what's happening in live time. Again, just familiarizing. Don't be afraid to be out there, especially one as the comms people, but as your superintendents, assistant soups, your cabinet members, the rest of your communications team, if you're lucky enough to have a team. Consistency is key. You don't need to be elaborate. You need to be consistent. It's simple, small things on a regular basis that build those relationships of trust, build that familiarity. Spend your time with your audiences, because otherwise you might just be solving problems that don't even exist. And be authentically you. You don't need to put on a facade. In fact, if you do put on a facade of who you think a superintendent should be, who you think a chief communications officer should be, what a PIO should sound like, people see right through it. And really, that the help that you would get from the familiarity ends up being a hindrance, because people are like, oh, I can see right through that, charade. With that, I will stop. Thank you guys for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Nikki. We have a couple of minutes. If there's any last minute questions, I'll give it just a minute. And as we're waiting for any questions to come in, thank you so much. Really actionable tips that people can utilize in today's workday to make their district more human. I love that. love the concept and love the tips. So thank you so much for your time